Thank you everyone, and thank you for being here. The people who keep our towns and cities alive when the lights come on and not when they go out. And to be here in Liverpool, what better place for this summit? A city that's a cultural icon in its own right. The home of the Beatles, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and the Lightning Seeds. And also Camel Fat, and I've also danced to a few of their bangers over the times as well. And the legendary nightclub, of course, Cream, and later the Creamfields Festival. I want to start on a personal note, because the nighttime economy isn't an abstract concept to me. It's not a spreadsheet or a briefing note. It's something I've relied on and lived and loved. I grew up in a working class household. Opportunities didn't come easy. Like millions of people across the country, my early working life was shaped by hospitality, by late shifts, by weekends and by graft. People know I was working in the care sector as a home help, but they might not know that, like so many of you, I also worked in a pub, the Malt Shovels in Cheadle. Unfortunately, it's not there anymore. Pubs, clubs and venue bars, these places weren't just where I worked, they were where I found my confidence, community and culture. They were spaces where people like me learned how to show up, how to perform and how to belong. And yes, I still love a night out. I always have, because nightlife at its best is joyful, it's creative, it's social, it's human.
Angela Rayner strikes at Labour fiscal policy as frontline unity fractures. Welcome back to Britain Underneath, where we peel back the polished layers of Westminster to reveal the raw, unvarnished power struggles shaping our nation. Before we plunge into this unfolding political drama, take a moment to subscribe to Britain Underneath and hit that notification bell. It truly helps the channel bring you the sharpest analysis on UK politics, so do stay with us until the very end. Take a breath and stay informed. Now, let us dive straight into the growing divide at the heart of government.
And it matters. The nighttime economy is not a sideshow, it is a cornerstone of who we are as a country. Economically, its contribution is enormous, supporting millions of jobs, driving tourism, powering local economies and sustaining supply chains that stretch far beyond our high streets. But its value goes far deeper than GDP. The UK's global identity, our music, our fashion, our art, our cultural influence is inseparable from what happens after dark. People come to this country because our venues, our screens, our creativity. They come to perform here, to learn here, to start their careers here. For generations, the UK has been a cultural launchpad to the world. And that didn't happen by accident, it happened because we created spaces, often grassroots, often fragile, often independent, where talent could take risks and community could gather. And that is why what happens to this sector now matters so deeply. Because let's be honest with each other, the nighttime economy has endured years of hardship. Long before the pandemic, businesses were already under pressure. Then COVID hit the sector hard and fast, with the shock impact still felt today, with the nighttime economy having shrunk by 30% compared to before the pandemic struck. And since then, it's been a story of rising costs, energy bills, staffing shortages, inflation, business rates and debt, creating a perfect storm. The real human and business impacts are stark. As numbers of nightclubs, once a haven for our youth, have declined in this country by 30% since 2019, and over 75,000 jobs were lost in the sector between 2024 and 2025 alone. And while resilience is something this industry has in abundance, the burden of recovery cannot just fall solely at its feet. The burden must be shared. Over 70% of this sector is made up of small and medium-sized enterprises, independents, grassroots venues, family fund and run businesses. These are not faceless corporations. They're people who are taking risks, employing locally, investing emotionally and financially in their communities.
The facade of Labour unity is showing serious cracks, and the latest tremor comes from none other than Angela Rayner. Speaking at the Nighttime Economy Summit in Liverpool, Rayner delivered a speech that was framed as a defence of grassroots culture, but read between the lines, and it was a direct broadside at the Treasury fiscal strategy under Rachel Reeves. Rayner stood before venue owners, cultural figureheads and industry leaders to lay bare the brutal realities facing Britain's nightlife. Over 75,000 jobs lost in recent years, a 30% reduction in venues since the pandemic, and small, independent businesses suffocating under soaring energy bills, crushing business rates and relentless VAT pressures. But she did not stop at cataloguing the damage. She pointed the finger squarely at government policy, calling out a rigid, one-size-fits-all approach that fails to understand the real world. That phrase was not aimed solely at local councils or past administrations. It was a thinly veiled critique of the current Treasury orthodoxy managed by Rachel Reeves. While Reeves preaches fiscal discipline and tight spending controls, Rayner is demanding pragmatic investment, business rate relief, and targeted financial breathing space for an industry on its knees. It reveals a fundamental tension within the cabinet. On one side, a Treasury obsessed with spreadsheets and market confidence. On the other, working-class representation arguing that cold economic models are destroying the social fabric of British towns and cities.
And if we're serious about recovery, then we must fuel the recovery of them. That means recognising the value, not just in rhetoric, but in policy. And this is where we must be candid. There is without doubt a clear divide between policy that truly understands the nighttime economy and policy that simply applies a one-size-fits-all approach. Too often, policy is done to this sector, not with it. And I recognise clearly and openly that more needs to be done to engage the industry directly and consistently and respectfully, to listen, to co-design, to recognise expertise where it exists, because confidence in politics matters. Businesses need to believe that they will be treated fairly, that the rules won't shift without warning, that the long-standing structural issues will finally be addressed, not deferred again. That means looking seriously at the pressure points. Over the last few weeks, I've spoken candidly with businesses in my own constituency and many beyond it. And they say it's a huge challenge that they're facing and that it's a challenge just to stay afloat. Customers aren't just there in the same.
Rayner leaned heavily into her own background, reminding the audience of her time working behind the bar at the Malt Shovels pub in Cheadle. She reminded voters that she understands hard work and late shifts, contrasting her lived experience with the detached technocracy often associated with Whitehall. By positioning herself as the defender of working people, small business owners and cultural spaces, Rayner is subtly carving out her own space, distinct from the cautious narrative radiating from Downing Street. She went further, explicitly demanding a named minister for the nighttime economy and calling for major reforms to licensing, late-night transport and worker protections. She argued that cultural value does not just exist in historic stone buildings, but in the grassroots venues and basement clubs where working-class communities gather. When a senior figure speaks with such candour about systemic policy failure, it signals that the internal debate over economic strategy is becoming impossible to contain behind closed doors.
Way as they used to be, as business rates remain punishingly high, energy bills soar, and costing your supply chains and VAT bites. Across Europe, governments recognise that hospitality and nightlife required extended support, not handouts, but as investment. Now the government needs to plan to aid recovery, to stabilise the cost, to give businesses breathing space. I believe the government should look at how to support the night economy to thrive once again, more seriously. Not ideology, but pragmatically. But economic reform alone is not enough. We also need to look at how the system enables, or too often restricts, this sector's ability to thrive. That means licensing. The government should be working towards a more enabling, more permissive approach to licensing, one that recognises the value of well-run venues and trusts them as partners, not problems. A system that is proportionate, efficient and rooted in partnership rather than constant friction. And I'm delighted today to see the Mayor of London take this forward, announcing today a London-wide strategic licensing policy to boost the capital's vital hospitality and nightlife industries, something that I pushed for when I was Deputy Prime Minister and Secretary of State. And we now need to see more of this.
This public intervention highlights a growing ideological rift. Is Labour's government meant to strictly enforce fiscal restraint, or is it meant to intervene boldly to protect vulnerable sectors? As small venues close and high streets struggle, the clash between Treasury balance sheets and frontline realities will only intensify. Rayner has drawn her line in the sand, subtly challenging her colleagues to offer more than warm words while businesses go under. Westminster power dynamics are shifting rapidly, and the battle over the nation's economic direction is far from settled. Thank you for watching Britain Underneath. If you value independent, sharp analysis that cuts through the political spin, please consider subscribing to Britain Underneath right now. Your support keeps this channel running and allows us to keep digging beneath the surface of British politics. Stay tuned for our next update, and as always, stay informed.